You're listening to the Dead Presidents Podcast.
And this is the top 5 would-be presidential assassins.
We're about to take a dive. 4 into presidential lore. 3 who will talk like me. 2 we're about to tell you. 1 the show's now begun.
Welcome to the Dead Presidents Podcast. I am James J. Hamilton.
And I'm Stephen Lincoln Douglas.
We love our presidents, and we would never try to assassinate them.
That's right, James, but if we did, we would know what not to do, thanks to this top 5.
It's the top 5 would-be presidential assassins.
Number 5.
Griselio Torresola and Oscar Colazzo. On October 30th, 1950, the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party coordinated a series of violent protests in favor of Puerto Rican independence. In New York City, 2 Puerto Rican nationalists, Griselio Torresola and Oscar Colazzo, decided to do their part to raise awareness for the cause, so they took a train to Washington, D.C. They learned that the White House was being renovated, and President Harry Truman was living across the street at the Blair House. On November 1st, 1950, they approached the house from different directions on what they knew was a suicide mission. Colazzo tried to shoot a police guard in the back, but hit his right knee. A Secret Service agent ran outside and shot Colazzo in the chest.
Ouch.
2 other officers also shot Colazzo.
Jeez.
Torresola shot White House police officer Leslie Koffelt in the chest 3 times, and another officer in the back and neck.
Bullets are flying.
He shot another officer in the knee and was reloading his gun when Truman, who had been napping on the 2nd floor, peered out of the 2nd-story window to see what was going on. Secret Service agents shouted at Truman to get back. At that moment, Leslie Koffelt, who had just been shot 3 times in the chest, propped himself up and shot Torresola in the head from 30 feet away.
Bullseye.
Koffelt then passed out and died at the hospital a few hours later. It was described as the biggest gunfight in Secret Service history. Colazzo survived and was sentenced to death, but Truman commuted it to life imprisonment, which is more brutal. In 1979, Jimmy Carter commuted it to time served, and Colazzo went back to Puerto Rico, where he died in 1994, hopefully as the result of being bitten by some rabid animal.
He didn't live long enough to see himself make the list of top 5 failed assassins.
Too bad, but that brings us right along to the top 5 would-be presidential assassin,
Number 4.
Giuseppe Zangara.
He was born in Italy, served in World War I, immigrated to the United States in 1923, and became a bricklayer. Ever since his childhood, he suffered from severe chronic abdominal pain.
Agita.
Nobody could figure out what was wrong with him or give him any relief. On February 15th, 1933, he was living in Miami, where President-elect Franklin Delano Roosevelt, just a few weeks shy of his inauguration, gave an impromptu speech from the back of an open car. At that moment, Zangara approached, armed with a .32 caliber revolver, but he was only 5 feet tall and unable to see over the crowd. James Madison towered over Giuseppe Zangara.
Giuseppe Zangara was a very diminutive man.
He sure was.
Yeah, wow.
So what could he do?
We built up Madison's height here at the beginning to make it look like, wow, the shortest president, and then we talk about a guy that's literally 5 feet tall.
So how was he going to attempt this assassination? He had to stand on a wobbly metal folding chair to see over the crowd. He peered over the hat of Lillian Cross, who was a woman standing in front of him. He fired a shot at Roosevelt when Lillian Cross grabbed his arm. Zangara fired 4 more wild shots before the crowd subdued him. FDR was unharmed, but 5 other people were hit, including Anton Cermak, the mayor of Chicago, who ended up dying a few weeks later from his
I
wounds.
wanna take a second to give a little pat on the back and round of applause to Lillian Cross
Yeah, Lillian
for
Cross.
a great taste in hats and a strong arm.
Yeah, I think she was invited to FDR's inauguration and
As she should have been.
was lauded for her conduct. FDR held Chicago Mayor Cermak in his arms as their car rushed to the hospital, and Cermak repeatedly said the line that was engraved on his tombstone, "I'm glad it was me, not you." Zangara was arrested and he confessed at the jailhouse, saying,
I have a gun in my hand. I kill the kings and the presidents first, and next all the capitalists.
he pled guilty to murder and attempted murder and received a death sentence. He said,
You give me the electric chair. I'm not afraid of that chair. You want a capitalist. You's a crook man too. Put me in electric chair. I don't care.
he was reportedly very upset when he found out that there would be no cameras recording his last moments, but his last words in the electric chair were,
Viva l'Italia. Goodbye to all of the poor peoples everywhere. Push the button. Go ahead. Push the button. Amanda mierda butonalo to Ricorofici.
There's actually a conspiracy theory that Zangara was not trying to shoot FDR at all, but was a hitman hired by the Chicago mob boss Frank Nitti to kill Cermak, who had allegedly tried to have Nitti killed months earlier. And Philip K. Dick's novel, The Man in the High Castle, is an alternate history in which the Axis powers win World War II. And it starts with the premise that Zangara succeeded in killing FDR.
Very interesting.
Very history-changing potential that I guess Lillian Cross knocked out of the way.
Yeah, a tiny guy that climbed up on a chair in order to try and kill the president-elect.
Could have won it all for Hitler, but Lillian Cross had something else to say about it.
Yeah, and if you think that's crazy, that's going to bring us to would-be presidential assassin
Number 3.
Richard Lawrence. A house painter who in his 30s began to manifest mental illness. Some historians have speculated that exposure to toxic chemicals in paint may have contributed. Kind of like the Mad Hatter syndrome.
That's what I thought too.
Born in England, immigrated to Washington, D.C. as a child, in the 1830s, Lawrence became verbally and physically abusive to his sisters over imagined slights, threatened to kill a maid who he thought was laughing at him, would engage in nonsensical conversations with himself, had laughing and cursing fits.
This guy sounds nuts.
A little bit barmy, as they would say. So what is a poor afflicted fellow like that to do?
He's cooking up something.
That's right. So we're going to let the illustrious author Robert Remini set the scene for us here from his masterful 3-volume biography of President Jackson. So the setting here is a congressional funeral. Quote, the rites concluded, the congregation filed past the bier and then proceeded to the east porch of the Capitol, the House members first, then the Senate, with the President following behind. Waiting at the entrance of the rotunda of the east portico stood a 30-year-old man, his face hidden by a thick black beard. As the President, with Levi Woodbury and John Dickerson, reached the rotunda, the young man stepped up to him, drew a pocket pistol, and aimed it directly at Jackson's heart. He stood only 2.5 yards away. He squeezed the trigger and an explosion rang out. Some said it sounded like a rifle shot. Senator John Tyler, who had stepped out of the line of procession, said it reminded him of an ordinary cracker. Jackson instantly reacted. Instead of ducking away, as most rational men might do, he started for the assailant, his walking cane raised high. The young man dropped the pistol and produced a second one, which he had held ready-cocked in his left hand. By this time, several witnesses realized what was happening and tried tried to seize the would-be assassin. But before they could wrestle him to the ground, he took dead aim at the president and pulled the trigger. A second explosion thundered through the chamber. Jackson hesitated only a split second and then continued his lunge at his assailant, ready to thrash him with his cane. The young man ducked away. Woodbury aimed a blow at him, and Lieutenant Gedney of the Navy finally knocked him down. The president pressed after him until he saw he was secured. In both instances, the caps had discharged, but failed to ignite the powder in the barrel. "The day was very damp," said Senator Tyler. "A thick mist prevailing, and the pistols were loaded with the finest powder. It is almost a miracle that they did not go off." So, wow.
Point blank range, 2 pistols misfired.
Yeah.
Jackson raises his cane to attack the attacker.
Yeah.
He's pulled off by Representative Davy Crockett was there intervening to get Jackson away from Lawrence. Why did Lawrence do this?
Yeah, who was this? Who was this cat? Everybody was wondering it. And it turned out to be an unemployed house painter. He was quickly hurried off to civil authorities, and the House Sergeant-at-Arms asked him why he attempted to assassinate the president. Lawrence replied that Jackson had killed his father 3 years ago and said something to the effect that he was the legitimate heir to the British throne and that Old Hickory, Andrew Jackson, had impeded his succession somehow. It turned out his actual father, Richard Lawrence's actual father, had died a dozen years before. So they just concluded, like, this guy is a complete nutcase. And John Tyler said about the whole thing, "There's nothing but madness in all this."
Yeah, of all the people who would have had a legitimate reason to shoot Andrew Jackson, like if a member of the Cherokee Nation had shot him, you wouldn't even have to ask why, but this guy, total nutbag, totally delusional.
Yeah, pretty crazy. And interesting tidbit, he was tried by a prosecuting attorney of note.
Oh, yeah?
That is true. Francis Scott Key.
How'd the case turn out?
Not,
Lawrence found not guilty by reason of insanity.
Yeah.
How did he conduct himself in court?
He didn't conduct himself very well. The jury only deliberated for 5 minutes. So he would end up being confined to mental hospitals until he died in 1861. So he hung in there for quite a while. And yeah, he had gone off the hinges and said, "It is for me, gentlemen, to pass judgment on you, and not you upon me." Like, and of course he was probably like,
he's the king of England.
Yeah,
he doesn't have to listen to some Washington, D.C. jury.
I'm the rightful king of England. I'm the king. You're loony.
Yep. He died in the mental hospital.
Yeah.
A common...
it's common among, every assassin.
That brings us...
try to bring in their mental state. And I suppose that's going to bring us to would-be presidential assassin...
Number 2.
John Schrank.
John Schrank was born in Bavaria, immigrated to New York as a child. His parents died. He went to live with his aunt and uncle. They died. Then his first and only girlfriend died in a steamboat accident.
Ouch.
He
Lots
suffers
of just death.
lots of tragedy. He begins drifting around the East Coast. He's very religious. He becomes a Bible scholar. He writes poetry. But in 1912, John Schrank had a dream where he was visited by the ghost of William McKinley, the 25th president who'd been assassinated in 1901, elevating Vice President Teddy Roosevelt to the presidency. According to Schrank, McKinley's ghost told him to avenge his assassination and pointed to a picture of Teddy Roosevelt.
Wow.
Ghost McKinley laying the blame on TR even though in real life there's no involvement of TR in the McKinley assassination. I don't think there's even a conspiracy theory about it.
No, there's not. No.
But John Schrank was visited by the ghost of McKinley, and you can't ignore the ghost of McKinley.
No, he was, foreboding in life. I mean, he had well, we'll talk about McKinley in episode 25, but, I mean, he was a man that, he had a good presence.
Yeah.
And let alone as a phantasmal presence.
So this is 1912. Teddy Roosevelt is running for president as a third-party candidate in the Progressive Party, the Bull Moose Party, as he nicknamed it. He had already served almost 2 full terms as president. He declined to run for another and let his hand-picked successor, William Howard Taft, take the reins. But then TR wasn't too thrilled with the Taft administration and decided to run against him in 1912. He split the Republican Party in the process, by the way, and handed the election to Democrat Woodrow Wilson.
Bo-dum, bo-dum, bow.
But about a month before the election, on October 12th, 1912, TR was in Milwaukee, getting in his car to go give a speech when he stopped to acknowledge a cheering crowd. And that's when John Schrank stepped out of the crowd and shot TR right in the chest. The
Ouch.
bullet lodged in his chest after passing through and hitting his steel eyeglasses case and a folded copy of his 50-page speech. The crowd was about to tear Schrank apart when TR said, "Don't hurt him, bring him here." He asked him, "What did you do it for?" Schrank didn't respond, so TR said, "What's the use? Turn him over to police. You poor creature, see that there is no violence done to him." As an experienced hunter, TR knew that since he was not coughing blood, the bullet had not reached his lungs, so he refused to go to the hospital and went forward and delivered his speech anyway.
Like a boss.
He spoke for 84 minutes as blood seeped into his shirt. He told the crowd, "Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know whether you fully understand that I have just been shot, but it takes more than that to kill a bull moose."
Damn.
His long-ass speech in his pocket saved his life.
TR, boy.
He went to the hospital after the speech, and the doctors determined that it would be more dangerous to try to remove the bullet, so he carried it in his chest muscle for the rest of his life.
Good thing he was a beast.
Yeah, he was a
Chopping
beast.
down trees and shit. Like he had enough pecs
He
that
gets-
his pecs impeded a bullet.
Yeah. He
With the help of a very
man.
lengthy speech and a metal eyeglasses case, but still.
He gets shot in the chest and then goes on to deliver a speech that might be one of the most badass incidents in presidential history.
TR, I bet his pecs were he was the Terry Crews among presidents.
You can probably dance him up and down
Yep,
at will.
would be my guess.
Old John Schrank was quickly determined to be suffering from insane delusions, grandiose in character.
Yes, of course.
He was declared to be insane and, like Richard Lawrence, spent the rest of his life in a hospital for the criminally insane. He later claimed that he had nothing against Roosevelt the man, but intended to kill Roosevelt the third-termer as a warning to other would-be third-termers, and confirmed that it was McKinley's ghost that told him to do it.
That's pretty crazy. When did he die? Do you know?
I think he died maybe sometime in the 20s or 30s. He outlived Roosevelt, and I think when Teddy Roosevelt died, he admitted that Teddy Roosevelt was a good man and mourned his passing.
Yeah, but to bring up the third term thing,
Yeah.
did he live to see Roosevelt run for a third term? Like Franklin Roosevelt?
No, he definitely didn't live till FDR's third
Okay,
term.
so we have a political assassin Nostradamus type thing?
Perhaps.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, he would have died maybe during FDR's first term. I'm not sure, but he would have cheered I don't remember what number the
Wonder how
amendment
likely
was. The constitutional amendment that limited presidents to 2 terms should have been called the John Schrank Amendment.
Yeah, the John Schrank Amendment. Yeah, that's pretty weird. Wow. A lot of lunacy here in this top 5, which brings us roundabout to the number 1 would-be presidential assassin.
John Hinckley. Oh man, so excited for John Hinckley. He grew up in an upper-class family in Texas. He was a depressed and aimless youth, but he kept his more severe mental health issues hidden from his family. In 1976, he dropped out of college and moved to Hollywood hoping to become a musician. Instead, he became obsessed with a new movie that just hit theaters, Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver, in which Robert De Niro plays Travis Bickle, a depressed loner who plots to assassinate a presidential candidate and ends up rescuing a 12-year-old prostitute played by Jodie Foster by killing her pimp and 2 other men in a shooting spree for which he is lauded as a hero. An excellent film.
Indeed.
Hinckley started dressing in fatigues and buying guns like Travis Bickle. He made up a fake girlfriend to tell his parents about, like Travis Bickle did. And then he got his parents to give him money to go take a writing course at Yale. Why would he want to go to Yale?
Well,
That's where Jodie Foster went. He left letters and poems under her door. He called her on the phone, but he was too shy to approach her in person. He failed to make that connection. He used up the rest of his money that his parents gave him to begin stalking President Jimmy Carter at several campaign stops. On one of those trips, he was arrested at the airport for possessing guns. He went home, tried to go home, but his dad kicked him out of the house for repeatedly failing to get a job. And now he just began wandering the country. He went back to Hollywood, went back to Yale. He went to New York, where John Lennon had just been shot.
yeah, just looking like a pretty hapless drifter.
He idolized John Lennon and seriously considered killing himself on the same spot where Lennon died. He just couldn't stop thinking about Jodie Foster. He felt like he had to do something big to get her attention.
Uh-oh.
So he went to Washington, D.C. And on March 30th, 1981, a couple hours before the assassination attempt, Hinckley wrote a final letter to Jodie Foster.
30th of March, 1981, 12:45 p.m. Dear Jodie, there is a definite possibility that I will be killed in my attempt to get Regan. It is for this very reason that I am writing you this letter now. As you well know by now, I love you very much. Over the past 7 months, I've left you dozens of poems, letters, and love messages in the faint hope that you could develop an interest in me. Although we talked on the phone a couple of times, I never had the nerve to simply approach you and introduce myself. Besides my shyness, I honestly did not wish to bother you with my constant presence. I know that the many messages left at your door and in your mailbox were a nuisance, but I felt that it was the most painless way for me to express my love for you. I feel very good about the fact that you at least know my name and know how I feel about you. And by hanging around your dormitory, I've come to realize that I'm the topic of more than a little conversation, however full of ridicule it may be. At least you know that I'll always love you. Jodie, I would abandon this idea of getting Regan in a second if I could only win your heart and live out the rest of my life with you, whether it be in total obscurity or whatever. I will admit to you that the reason I'm going ahead with this attempt now is because I just cannot wait any longer to impress you. I've got to do something now to make you understand, in no uncertain terms, that I am doing all of this for your sake. By sacrificing my freedom and possibly my life, I hope to change your mind about me. This letter is being written only an hour before I leave for the Hilton Hotel. Jodie, I'm asking you to please look into your heart and at least give me the chance with this historical deed to gain your respect and love. I love you forever. John Hinckley.
A historical deed indeed.
And pretty batshit.
So Reagan left the Hilton Hotel after giving a speech, and he was headed towards the presidential motorcade past a crowd of reporters and some people, a crowd who had negligently not been screened by the Secret Service.
Ouch.
As reporters shouted questions, Hinckley opened fire with a .22 caliber revolver loaded with exploding tip bullets. He fired 6 shots, wounding a police officer and a Secret Service agent and hitting Press Secretary James Brady in the head, permanently disabling him. The 6th shot hit the presidential limo and ricocheted into Reagan's chest as Secret Service was hustling him into the limo. It drove away, and at first they thought Reagan hadn't been hit, but then he started coughing up blood. And he would have...
Yeah, actually Reagan, wrote that he thought that they had broke his ribs when they threw him into the limo and jumped on top of him. Because he actually, cried out, the first pain that he felt was when they threw him into the car and jumped on him, and he was like, Jesus Christ, I think you just broke my ribs.
Yeah.
And
I think he thought he was bleeding from a cut lip at first.
Yeah.
And I guess probably adrenaline is pumping so much that he doesn't even realize he's got a
He actually thought that the Secret Service just fucked him up. And that actually was not the case.
Yeah, they quickly realized he'd been shot and rushed him to the hospital where he underwent surgery to remove the bullet, saving his life. I think the doctors opined that most 70-year-old men in his condition probably would have died, but he pulled
He tried to walk in on his own.
Yeah, I think, he walked into the hospital.
He tried to walk in on his own. I think he barely got to the front desk, but...
falling to his knees, but What did he... Then Nancy was arrived. She was in hysterics about it.
Yeah, she was freaking out, and... at this point, he's they're taking him back into, to do this surgery and shit. Mm-hmm. And it's every second counts. And Nancy's there in hysterics. Doctor probably at the point where it's all right, get her the hell out of here. But Reagan takes the time to say, sorry, honey, I forgot to duck. and busts a quip out. And then, not to stop there, this potentially dying dude with an explosive round lodged near his heart says to the doctors right before they're ready to put him under and cut him open and see what they could do here, well, I hope you're all Republicans.
I think the doctor said, Mr. President, we're all Republicans today, even though the doctor was a liberal Democrat. He still removed the bullet.
Yeah, so that was insane. And speaking of which, John Hinckley was found not guilty by reason of insanity. And that verdict obviously pissed off a lot of people and prompted a little bit of reform, didn't it there, Jim?
Yeah, people were outraged by this verdict, and there was substantial reform of the insanity defense. At that time, it was the prosecution's burden of proof to prove that the defendant was sane, and afterwards, the federal criminal justice system, and I think most states, have transferred the burden of proof to the defendant to prove insanity.
Yeah.
Hinckley was also confined to a mental hospital. But unlike our last couple failed assassins, he did not stay there forever. Being found not guilty by reason of insanity, you're only confined for as long as you are considered a danger to yourself or others.
Yeah.
And Hinckley was there for many years. Starting in 2003, he started being allowed to have unsupervised visits to his parents' house. He got more and more freedom to go stay with his parents, and then in the year 2016 he was released. So John Hinckley is back on the streets. He is released with a lot of conditions. Right. One of the conditions of his release is that he's not allowed to do interviews. So
which we found out the hard
Yeah,
way.
unfortunately, we couldn't have him on this episode.
We tried.
As we planned. Or the eventual Reagan episode.
Yeah, we were going to cut it into both so that he would have been a bonus here and we would have had him on the Reagan show. Alas.
What a shame. He's not allowed to own guns. He's not allowed to watch violent movies. So I guess that means he can't watch Taxi Driver anymore. Hasn't seen Taxi Driver since it was played in court as part of his defense.
Yeah.
And I guess he'll never get to see Silence of the Lambs.
Ooh.
Which is a real shame because Jodie
Yeah.
Foster was just amazing in that.
Is just really missing out.
I wonder
That's
if
too
he's
bad.
found a way to sneak a viewing of Silence of the Lambs. Most importantly, he's not allowed to contact Jodie Foster
Yeah, that
Or-
I think that would just kind of
or
be
her family or
that would go without
representatives.
saying.
He is also not allowed to contact current or former presidents or visit their homes or graves.
Wow, so like we couldn't even hang out.
I know.
Not that
It
I'd
sounds
want to.
like-
Fuck that guy.
You know, based on these conditions, it sounds like he should still be allowed to listen to this podcast.
Yeah,
So
we
we-
should let him listen to this so that he could hear me.
Yeah,
Say, fuck you.
We could be the only source of information for him on those presidential homes that he's not allowed to go to. And that's a shame because he lives in Virginia, which has the most presidential homes.
Yeah, what a drag.
So, John Hinckley, if you're out there listening, stay tuned to this episode to hear about our trip to James Madison's Montpelier, and try not to get too jealous. If you want us to deliver a message for you to Jodie Foster, hit us up on Twitter at DeadPrezPodcast.
That's Prez with a Z.
Amazing.
And yeah,
I can't believe, you know, Hinckley, he did this thinking, trying to impress Jodie Foster. I can't help but think Jodie Foster might have been impressed if he had actually succeeded in the assassination attempt. Yeah, Hinckley, Jodie's not going to be impressed with a failed assassination attempt. And I know Hinckley, he's obsessed with Taxi Driver. Apparently didn't learn the lesson of Taxi Driver. Use the .44 Magnum. You show up at an assassination attempt with a fucking pea-shooting .22, even with exploding bullets. You can't expect to kill anybody.
well, he was clearly a nut.
You don't, come on, Hinckley. You know what a .44 Magnum would do to a president's face? Would fucking destroy it.
Yeah,
That you should see.
you should see that. What a
Yeah,
44 Magnum.
I guess I missed the part of Taxi Driver where Travis Bickle got 122 pistol and was like, yeah, this is enough. He wouldn't have made it into that building to kill those pimps if all he had was a 22.
No, for sure.
Come on, Hinckley. Get yourself a .44 Magnum next time.
You fucking bum ya. Hey, we got an interesting addendum here to this
Yeah.
episode's top 5.
We
We
have
have honorable mentions. And there's a duo of women here
Yeah.
that we would like to talk about because it's, frankly, super interesting and awesome because
It's very important.
both of these women acted within just over 2 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and both of them tried to kill the same president.
Yep. Lynette Squeaky Fromm of the Manson family tried to shoot President Gerald Ford in Sacramento in 1975, but she forgot to put a round in the chamber, and her Colt 45 was disarmed before she could get a real shot off.
Yeah, see, even Squeaky Fromm knew, like, I'm going into this with a 45.
Yeah, but she doesn't know to put a round in the chamber.
Ouch.
Once again, not studying Taxi Driver sufficiently.
Yeah.
But that was enough for Squeaky to break the glass ceiling and become the first female failed assassin.
Yeah.
Squeaky served as an inspiration to women everywhere. And just 17 days after she tried to kill Ford, Sarah Jane Moore tried to kill Ford in San Francisco, shooting a .38 caliber revolver at him from 40 feet away. She missed her first shot, and a bystander grabbed her and ruined her second shot. These two ladies each served over 30 years in prison, but they're out now. They're out on parole. If John Hinckley's single,
Yeah.
I think they should mingle.
Not a bad idea. Side note, Sarah Jane Moore actually did hit somebody. The second shot ricocheted and hit a cab driver in the groin.
Ouch.
So yeah.
Yeah, all these attempted assassins were, quickly, pulled down by the crowds. The American people jumping to the defenses of their presidents.
Yeah, that's the way it goes sometimes.
We never make the same bonehead mistakes as these failed assassins. And now, you won't make those mistakes either. Until next time, this has been the Dead Presidents Podcast.